Hello, good evening. It is Monday, November 10th, 2025, and I'm Regina, and we also have Angela here, both of us with Women's Personal Finance, here with one of our members also presenting, Emilie Cleaver, who's going to talk to us all about navigating, building a relationship with a therapist or picking a therapist and figuring out the various ins and outs of that, which feels like a conversation almost everybody can benefit from right now and always, but especially right now. So,
Especially right
um,
now.
as a reminder, we are not financial professionals, at least me and Angela. Let Emilie make any disclosures she needs to do. Yeah, so this is hopefully fun and educational. And
I'm Emilie Cleaver. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor in Ohio. I will say that I am not giving therapy or any therapeutic advice today, but I am going to talk about finding a good therapist and what that can look like, especially in today's world where it's extra hard and extra needed. Um, so I know, uh, especially Angela, but Angela and Regina, because I used to be a student loan debt blogger, and now I mostly just go on threads and talk about books and parenting and not very much about money anymore. But I do love money and I love talking about it. So today I'm going to talk about finding a therapist. And one of the most important things there is finances. So I'm going to incorporate that a lot. And the first thing I would say is to think about what are you looking for in a therapist? And there are several different areas to think about here. First, I'm going to talk about the financial piece of it. So, how are you going to pay for therapy is one of the most important things to think about. It can be very expensive, unfortunately, and insurance can be really tricky. I am also gonna disclose I don't, in my practice, accept insurance, and I don't know a whole lot about how that world works. I've always paid private pay for my own therapy, but I will talk a little bit about paying for therapy with insurance. So one of the first places
And you'll
that
be able to talk to about like why you don't take
yes,
insurance and why you've never worked yourself with a therapist that does.
we'll
yeah,
have an anecdote
absolutely.
at some point to go with this about an email we received when we mentioned that we were going to have this conversation, which is interesting.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, so I would say think about, do you want to use your insurance to pay or to help pay for therapy or not? Some of the advantages of using insurance, of course, are that you may not need to pay the full price, which is probably the biggest advantage. You may have to pay your copay, refer back to your insurance to see what kind of mental health services your plan covers, um, and what your copay may look like there. The other route is to go private pay. A lot of I don't know. I would say there are a lot of practices that don't accept insurance and are only private pay or out of pocket. There are also a lot that do accept insurance, and it can be hard to get a spot in either situation. So think about what you want there. Some of the disadvantages I would say to using insurance are that they are almost certainly going to require you to have a diagnosis for your treatment. So insurance isn't going to pay for therapy unless they deem that it's medically necessary. And to do that, you have to have a diagnosis that is going to follow you in your medical record for however long it's determined that that is a part of your medical need, and it'll be there in your history. Documentation is also something to think about. So if you use your insurance, then your therapist is going to send them, if they get audited, your progress notes and any treatment plans and any information that the insurance company asks for, basically. I and most therapists that I know try to give the least amount of detail necessary in a progress note while still including everything that's needed. So I always tell my clients that my number one priority is going to be to protect your privacy. And so in any notes that I write, even though I am a private pay therapist, I may, for example, have documentation subpoenaed by a judge. And so I may need to present that. So I want to protect all of my clients' privacy. In my notes, I'm going to put, what's your mood that day? Is it different from how you are normally presenting, or is it pretty much the same? What did we work on? What did I do? What did you do? Or how did you respond? And what are we continuing to work on? So that's kind of a brief overview of insurance versus private pay. And I'm
And
seeing
real quick, yeah, we do have a question in the chat. Would you have to see a psychologist to get that diagnosis, or would that be your primary care?
So that would be you can get anything that's in the DSM, a therapist can diagnose. And I'll talk about like what kinds of licenses that is here in a few minutes, but it does not have to be a psychologist, and it doesn't have to be a medical doctor. You can, if you have a degree, a master's degree in a mental health field and are licensed, then you can diagnose anything that's in the DSM. You have to be specially trained in some areas in order to kind of prove that you're able to diagnose that. For example, autism, a lot of the times you need to be able to prove that you've had extra training and that you've had supervision in assessment and diagnosis. But for all intents and purposes, you can diagnose anything that is in the DSM.
And then if you're trying to get insurance, though, you can, I think for a lot of things, you can go to your primary care and they can get you basic diagnoses.
You can, but your therapist can diagnose it too. Like, for example, depression, generalized anxiety disorder, again, anything that's in the DSM. If you are seeing a licensed mental health professional, they will diagnose it, and they have to be the ones that are saying, yes, this is the diagnosis, if they're billing your insurance for it. Does that make sense?
I think, Emily, for this question, it was in relation to you saying that for it to be covered by insurance, you may need a diagnosis first. So if you were trying to like ladder into having a paid relationship with a therapist, you might need to have a diagnosis from a provider beforehand. And I think just
thank you
clarifying,
for
your doctor can say,
clarifying that. Yeah, so you usually during the first session, the therapist has to give you a diagnosis. So the first session is going to be, if you're using your insurance, it's typically going to be kind of a more regimented assessment type of session. So, and this can be with private pay too, but definitely if you're using your insurance, most of the time your therapist is going to be asking you a lot of questions called a biopsychosocial assessment, and getting all of this information from you in order to give you a diagnosis, which it sucks that I mean, as a therapist, that you have to get all of this information in like 1 hour and say, this is your diagnosis. And oftentimes a therapist may give you a diagnosis during that first session. And then once they get more information from you in ongoing care, that diagnosis can change. But in order for your therapist to be able to bill that first session, they have to give you a diagnosis to put on to document that medical necessity.
And then there's another comment in the chat saying that this also seems to depend a lot on your insurance, that they were able to schedule directly with a therapist without needing anything else and just searched for folks on their insurance website.
Yeah, that absolutely. You should not usually need a diagnosis ahead of time. Your therapist will give you a diagnosis in that first session. Sometimes you may, like, if you go to your primary care provider first and you're like, hey, I'm feeling really anxious, and they will refer you to a therapist, they may send you with a diagnosis or may not. But you shouldn't need one before you go into it. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I think so.
Okay. Awesome. So just an overview of private pay versus insurance, and there is more that I'll talk about with that too. Other options that are under those umbrellas are also, if you go to a private pay or out of pocket therapist, a lot of the times they can give you what's called a super bill. And so this is like an itemized receipt basically for therapy that you can give to your insurance company, and they may, you have to, I always tell my clients this, you have to check with your insurance to make sure that they may do this, but they can sometimes reimburse you directly for services, or they may count whatever you pay toward therapy toward your out of network deductible. So with a super bill though, you also have to have a diagnosis for your insurance company to count it most of the time. So you can get that super bill. It'll say, this is my diagnosis. These are the dates that I saw my therapist, and this is the cost that they charged. And you may, again, it may count toward your out of network deductible. Insurance company may reimburse you directly. But if you go that route, then you still do have to pay at the time of your service. The super bill is just kind of a thing that shows your insurance company, hey, I'm in therapy. Maybe you'll give me something for it.
What about another comment too? What about a super bill for HSA, FSA, or does that matter?
That is a great question. And I would say it probably depends on your insurance company or your employer. I personally, I do take HSA and FSA funds.
So you can do that even if I don't have an HSA or FSA, so I didn't realize that was a thing. So you can pay for therapy if you have an HSA or FSA money, even if the provider doesn't take insurance. Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't even have that on my list to talk about. So yes, you can pay with an HSA as long as your provider takes HSA funds or FSA funds, which
I don't know that would even matter, because you can pay privately and reimburse yourself as long as it's a qualified health spending. I would have to go dig in and see if mental health services are included under HSA, but if it's with a licensed provider, I can't see that it would not. So you may have to pay your provider if for some reason your Visa debit from your HSA card didn't work with them, but you should still be able to reimburse yourself. I would expect FSA accounts might have some more restrictions and rules, because those get a little bit more tricky. But if you can go buy tampons at Walgreens with your FSA card, you should be able to reimburse for therapy, I would think.
You can tell I've never had access to either, because I was like, didn't even consider that. So that's awesome. So you still can kind of pay for therapy with insurance through that.
I have paid personally for my therapy with my HSA card, and then I can take payments from HSA cards through my electronic health records system that also is like my billing system. So you can use an HSA, and probably I don't know again the ins and outs of the FSA, but probably that too. for therapy. So the other couple options for payment are a sliding scale or a reduced fee. These are two different things. A lot of therapists, though, don't understand that and will use the terms interchangeably, but technically a sliding scale is something that is kind of universally applied and has rules to it. So your therapist may say, if you are within this income bracket, then this is your fee. If you're in this one, then this is your fee. That's a sliding scale. A reduced fee is just kind of a little less structured, I would say. And that's where your therapist may say, you know, you're going through a hardship, or I am not requiring proof of your income, but you can, we can have this agreement that you're being charged a lower fee than my typical fee. Does that all make sense? Yeah. Okay, and I'll talk about some places where you can go to look for therapists that specifically will offer a reduced fee or a sliding scale as well. So other things to know, though, as you're looking for a therapist are what do you want to work on in therapy? So what type of specialty might you be looking for in a therapist? Are you looking for somebody specifically that works with ADHD, autism, depression, OCD, you know, whatever you may be looking for? Or, and I would say most of the time, kind of a generalist therapist is going to be okay. The most important thing I think is going to be your relationship and how well you click with that therapist, unless you're really looking for something specialized, again, like OCD treatment or an eating disorder or something pretty specific. But if you're like, you know, I think I am feeling a little anxious, or I'm just feeling depressed right now and need to talk to somebody, kind of a generalist therapist is going to be most of the time okay for that too. Think about too what type of treatment you want, or what we call modalities of therapy. I don't expect any of my clients to really know what any type of therapy modality means. There's a lot of letters involved: IFS, EMDR, CBT, DBT, like so many acronyms. But you do want to, as you're looking for a therapist, you want them to be able to tell you what type of modality that they use, or which couple ones they may pull from, and what does that mean? What does that look like in a session? You want your therapist to be able to explain kind of their theoretical orientation, or where they're getting their information in the way that they treat you. And sometimes you may be looking for something specific. So a big example of this is going to be EMDR, which is a type of treatment that's used a lot for trauma. A lot of people like it. A lot of people are looking for that specifically. Or exposure and response prevention, which is an OCD treatment that is kind of the gold standard for OCD. So you may be looking for something more specific, again, if you have a more specific need. But I would say, as long as your therapist can tell you what modalities that they practice from, maybe kind of what their theoretical orientation is, then that is going to be most of the time good enough. Again, the relationship that you have with them and how well you click with them is going to be the most important thing in most cases. That's not to say that like education isn't important and them knowing what they're talking about isn't important, but you're going to get more work done with somebody that you like and trust too.
I do have a question, Emily, just noting also, like, because you've mentioned, you know, needing a diagnosis if there's going to be billing. And then also that point I pulled from this place that talks about therapy and FSAs, noted therapy not required for medical or mental purposes typically doesn't qualify for the reimbursement, such as marriage and family counseling. So, like, would you define like counseling and therapy as two different things then? Because I think most of us also use that interchangeably. And like, I just want someone to talk to because I think it makes my mental health better, doesn't necessarily mean there's a diagnosis. Like navigating those two different things, are we looking at potentially different types of providers, or is it mostly just what might be likely to get reimbursement or not?
So that is an excellent question. And honestly, some of this stuff also depends on what state you're in. Based on where you are, things can be called different things. So counseling and therapy are, in my opinion, and in most cases, interchangeable, and they're not. So a counselor specifically has training in mental health counseling. That's what I am. My master's degree is in clinical mental health counseling, and my licensure is licensed professional clinical counselor. So I am specifically a counselor, but therapist is kind of a blanket term that can be used for a few different things. So I call myself a therapist most of the time. You can also be a therapist if you are a social worker, or if you're a marriage and family therapist, if you're a psychologist. So a therapist can be a lot of different things, and it's really not a regulated term, which I will get into that here soon too. But so therapy is kind of more general, and then you've got specific licensures that can be called a therapist, basically.
I have to insert why I have a little smirk here. Nothing to do with you. This was just a huge deep dive. I'm going to actually drop in the chat for friends curious. I ended up writing an article about how therapy isn't a protected term in Oregon because with our psilocybin initiative, there was a lot of confusion around that and people calling themselves therapists and charging lots and lots of money with, yep. So anyway, I've dived deep here too, but yeah, so it sounds like it can, so for user purposes, if it is there a way to is the person providing services any different if you're looking for someone who's working people and giving a diagnosis versus just like talk support without a diagnosis?
No, not usually. So if you are, again, there are different types of licenses, and it really more depends on what you're looking for, what kind of specialty you're looking for, or are you okay with somebody that's just a general like therapist or counselor? But the term doesn't necessarily matter. There are some differences in training uh, from like a licensed social worker versus a counselor versus, again, a marriage and family therapist. Those three in Ohio are all under the same board. We all get the same jobs. We all do basically the same thing. It's just the training is a bit different, and the different like schools that you get your master's degree in focuses on a little bit of a different area for each specialty. But I would say they're not necessarily different enough that I would say, oh, go to one over the other, unless you were specifically looking for a like marriage and family therapist. And even in that case, a counselor and social worker can also specialize in like marriage therapy or family therapy. So they're, for all intents and purposes, pretty similar. Some people may not like that. A lot of people are like, oh, there's such a big difference in training and all of the specialties, but we get the same jobs. Again, we are in Ohio all under the same board. And so you're not going to find, I would say, a huge, if you're in the general public, I don't think you're going to notice a big difference in who you see. The difference, I would say, would be in going a step higher in education. So that may be a psychologist, because they can do testing that somebody with a master's degree can't necessarily do. Sometimes if you do have a master's degree, you can get specialized training to do some psychological tests, but not all of them. You do have to have some extra training to be able to do some of the testing and assessments that you may want or need to do. For example, if you want to go on disability, you may need a letter from a psychologist or from somebody who's qualified to do certain types of testing. So if you are a master's level therapist, you have to be able to back up, I have the training and education to do that kind of assessment. There's also medication providers. So you can be a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner or an MD. Those can all prescribe psychiatric medications. Um, and so some of those specialties may also do therapy. So, like, your psychiatrist may do therapy, your psychiatric nurse practitioner may do therapy, and they can also prescribe medication. Okay. As we're talking about licensure too, it's called different things in different states. So we're in Ohio, I'm called an LPC. In some states, it's called like an LPCA, or like, I don't even know. There's different acronyms based on what state you're in, and what licensure you have. Different states also, and this can affect your cost too. For example, my license, I am what's called independently licensed, which means I have been in practice for 2 years or more, and I've had 3,000 hours of client sessions and 150 at least of supervision. And so I can now practice independently without a supervisor. When you are first graduated, your license is dependently licensed, which means you have to practice with a supervisor for this may be state dependent, but I think it's across the board pretty much. For at least 2 years, you have to have a supervisor, and you have to have 3,000 clinical hours and 150 hours of supervision, I think. Don't quote me on that. But so if you are seeing somebody who is dependently licensed, their cost is usually going to be a little bit lower. If you're seeing somebody who is they're called different things in different states. So some states, and it gets really confusing too, because in some states, if you are graduated and you have your license, they still are going to call you an intern until you get that, like, quote unquote full license. But you also have to have an internship while you're in school. So when you're in graduate school, you'll do an internship where you're seeing clients, but you're still a student. If you go to see a student intern, you're probably going to pay a much, much lower rate too. That's a really good way to get a lower rate in therapy, is to see somebody who is a student intern. But in some states, even after you graduate, before you have that independent license, they will still call you an intern. So it's important to also figure out in your state, what is that called? Some states, they'll call it an associate, for example, too. So I would say don't get too in the weeds with that, though. If you find somebody that you really click with, like, none of that's going to matter.
So it sounds like with all of this, for most people, it really, as long as they are a therapist or a counselor, like, the rest doesn't really matter. It's more about vibing with the person that you're going to spend your time with.
Yep. So once you have considered how you're going to pay, what you're looking for, if it's super important that they're specialized in something. Another thing to consider, are you looking for telehealth or are you looking to go somewhere in person? If you are interested in telehealth, that person that you're going to be seeing has to be licensed in your state, or you must be physically located in that state that they're licensed in during the time of your therapy session. For example, I am licensed only in Ohio right now, and I have a practice in Cincinnati, which is right next to Kentucky. So my practice is pretty specialized in neurodivergence, and we have a lot of clients that come and seek us out because of that. But if somebody lives in Kentucky and wants to see me for therapy, they cannot see me if they are physically in the state of Kentucky. They can drive their car over across the bridge to Cincinnati and do therapy in their car on telehealth with me, as long as it's there physically planted in the state of Ohio. So you got to be physically located where your therapist is. If you're on vacation in another state, you cannot have therapy via telehealth, because that is their license is not covered in that other state. So if you
can I interrupt, Emilie? Would that count too if it was more like, again, that line I was trying to draw between just academic conversations that support your mental health, like it in my mind, like pop culture wise, like there are definitely people who are, I'm on vacation in Europe and I'm talking to my therapist, so like that's probably not really okay. Is that like a thing rich people having access to?
If your therapist's board somehow found out about that, your therapist would be in trouble. But also, if you are in it's because of the like accountability. So if you're located in Kentucky and I'm licensed in Ohio, and I do something that you don't like, but you're in Kentucky, then I'm gonna get in trouble with my Ohio board. But you can't like report it to who are in Kentucky. Like,
yeah, that makes sense.
If you're it also gets tricky like internationally, because it depends on where you are internationally, what their rules are. So I have no idea what the rules are anywhere else, but for example, let's say you're like in you're on vacation in London, and in London they're like, oh yeah, you can have a therapist from anywhere and we will hold them accountable from London, then like that's fine. But yeah, I
enter formerly licensed life coaches. I know a lot of people in that area, so
yeah, well, and sometimes I am not here to speak to the ethics of this, but sometimes if you see a therapist in your state and then you're like moving to another state, which like this happens a lot with college students, for example, then they may switch over and say, okay, now I'm going to be coaching you instead of doing therapy with you. So we're going to sign a coaching agreement instead of therapy. That has very mixed opinions on the ethics in the counseling therapy world. There's actually currently a thing called the Counseling Compact that many different states have signed, and they are working on to have reciprocity between the states. That has been in the works for years now, and I don't know where they are with that, but every few months it's like, oh yeah, in 6 months we're expecting applications to open for the Counseling Compact, and this has been going on for like 3 years. So eventually we will be able to see clients that are in different states, but right now you're only allowed to see clients in states that you're licensed in. But a therapist can be licensed in multiple states. It's just a very tedious process.
Okay. So it sounds kind of like with like financial advisors, that there are money coaches that give too much advice for not being licensed, but as long as they're not licensed, they actually have more flexibility sneakily than if you're a licensed financial advisor. It kind of sounds
It's similar, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so where to find a therapist? You got a ton of options here. So again, I would say if you want to go the route of insurance, check with your insurance company. They probably have on their website a list of providers. You can probably call and reach out to somebody. I don't know. I have never gone that route and I don't take insurance. But surely you can check with your insurance company and they can direct you to therapists that they that are in network with them. If you are looking for something specific, excuse me, don't be afraid to Google like therapist OCD in Cincinnati or therapist near me. A lot of the times, if it is a good therapist, like you can find good therapists that are not tech savvy for sure. But if someone has put time and effort into their website and into getting into like Google search results, or if they've paid someone to do that, that's important to them. A lot of the time, I would say they're probably going to be a pretty good therapist because they have that attention to detail. Not all the time. Sometimes they're just like, oh yeah, I want to get as many clients as possible and I'll pay for it. But I would say, at least in my area, the people that have really nice websites that are very informative are also the ones that pay attention to detail and that we hear good things from. I would say therapist communities are pretty tight knit a lot of the time too. We talk to each other, we know each other, we refer to each other a lot of the time. So if you know a therapist, also don't be afraid to ask them, like, hey, who would you go to or who would you regularly refer somebody to? So Google is a good way to find a good therapist. Don't be afraid of that. There are also a ton of therapist directories that you can get on and search different categories of what you're interested in or what you need. So, for example, the biggest one probably is going to be Psychology Today, which is the most popular therapist directory. You can search by insurance, you can search by specialty, you can search by location. So they will give you a good list of therapists that you can reach out to on there. A couple other therapist directories out there that I have heard good things from or that I've been on are Therapy Den, goodtherapy.org. A really good one I would say is inclusive counseling, and I don't know if that's .com or .org, but they really vet their therapist that they let on there. You've got to do a pretty extensive application as a therapist that shows that you are really doing the work in terms of social justice. So that's a good directory to look on, especially if you're interested in a therapist that's social justice oriented and that is putting in some time to prove that they are. You've got to answer like 3 to 5 essay questions on like how are you working to be an ally, or how is your lived experience coming out in your therapy practice. So it's Laura asked in the chat, what was that again? Inclusive, what it's called? Inclusive. Hang on a second. I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right name here.
I will, while you're looking for that, I do want to say that I feel like I've heard quite a few people who have like had to drop their therapists in the last like 5 years or so because something comes up where it's clear that it's not working. And I feel like since the beginning of COVID, that's been a lot more obvious, even where, you know, if you have a big mismatch there with your therapist, like I can see it being like, how are you going to have a good time with therapy if you feel like you're working with someone who disagrees with you on like fundamental
Yeah.
stuff?
Okay. So it's inclusivetherapist.com. I put that in the chat. Um, and yeah, I would say too, there are some people, uh, some therapists who will not tell you their like political orientation. They will not give you information. They won't self-disclose information that they see as like political. Um, Again, speaking very openly, frankly, that's probably not a therapist that aligns with you politically. If they do, they're not going to be afraid to tell you. I've had clients that have asked me, and this is important to them, understandably, did you vote for Donald Trump? No, I am going to tell you, I did not, and will never. And it's important to be able to feel safe with your therapist. And a lot of these questions are about safety and how openly are you able to talk with your therapist about your own lived experience. So, um, while your therapist should not be telling you like the ins and outs of their life, you should feel confident that they're not actively like voting against your rights. That's just my little soapbox.
Happy Kim Davis sucks day.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah. So you there will be ways and should be ways too that you can see that your therapist is prioritizing your safety too. Like on their website, they should be making an effort to be inclusive and kind of if not very openly flagging that they're a safe person, um, at least kind of hinting at it. Like for example, in Ohio, we had a bill pass that really sucks for trans youth. And a lot of people, teachers, this covers like therapists, doctors, teachers, anybody that works with kids, were kind of required to report to parents if a child were to disclose that they were trans to them. But it was like written in such a way that it was really kind of unclear what that looks like. So what we did was we seeked out training for how do we deal with this ethically without like outing kids unnecessarily. And our priority is the safety of our clients at all times. So we on our website added a part that said, hey, if you are a parent, we are going to not tell you everything that your kid tells us in session for their safety, and you need to be okay with that. So there will be signs that your therapist is a safe person. You will probably, if
that's
they
kind
have,
of like with personal finance, like the money creators online. Like it's become very clear if they align or don't at this point.
yeah. Um, Other directories, specifically if you are looking for a therapist that offers a sliding scale or a reduced fee, Open Path Collective is a really great website for that. It's openpathcollective.org, I believe, and they offer sessions between, I think it's $40 to $70. You don't necessarily, it depends on the therapist that you find there. You don't necessarily have to like prove your income or anything, but some of the therapists on there will potentially ask about it. I am on Open Path, and it's no questions asked for me. I have my rate that I take from clients for Open Path. And I say, you know, if you are on here looking for a therapist, I'm going to believe that you need a reduced fee and not hound you about it. Some of the therapists on there do ask for like an income or a like paycheck stub, or ask you to explain a little bit about your financial circumstance, why you may need a reduced fee. A lot of them are not going to have you go that deep into it and just say, you know, I believe you if you're here. So again, that site specifically, you do have to pay a one-time membership fee to the website, which I think is like $60. And then you can find a therapist on there, and then you can like find therapists on there for a lifetime after you paid the one-time fee to become a member of the website. So that's a really good one if you are needing a therapist and you don't have insurance, or for some reason you want to do private pay, but you can't afford maybe a therapist's full fee. You can go on there and find somebody that will accept a reduced rate. And they, ooh, I'm going back real quick to when we were talking about like marriage and family therapists, like couples counseling, because couples therapy can also be a different category. So for couples counseling or family counseling, a lot of the time it's going to be a little bit more expensive via private pay. And or if you go through insurance, the coding on it can be tricky. So just keep that in mind if you are looking for couples counseling, that it can be a little bit more tricky to find a therapist if you're going through insurance, and it's a little bit more expensive if you're doing private pay, which sucks because if you're looking for a couples counselor, like you probably really need it. But that can be a little bit more tricky, but definitely not impossible.
I do want to note too that we are coming up on the hour.
Oh,
So
yep. Okay.
I know you probably have a lot, but also I want to give some people some time off the recording to ask questions
Yes,
too.
I am almost done.
Okay.
So sorry. So I will say, once you've done all of that, figured out what you're looking for, looked up some people on some directories, pick like 5 to 10 at least. A lot of the time you're going to reach out to a lot of therapists and probably never hear back from some of them because they're like not accepting clients and they're really bad at getting back with you, which is unfortunate but also very common. So reach out, email, call. I would say 5 to 10 therapists. Many are going to have like a 10 to 15-minute consultation that they offer to see if you may be a good fit. If they don't offer that, I would not take that as a red flag, because some people don't. Some people will just say, like, we got to schedule a first session with me, and they won't do a consultation. Again, that's not really a red flag, but if you are on the fence and you would rather have a consultation, just keep that in mind. I would say once you have a therapist picked out and you're like, yes, I really like this, or at least somewhere in this process, verify that they're actually licensed. Go on your state board website. I do this for myself all the time because I have a really bad memory and don't have my license number memorized. But go on your website. What I do is literally go on Google and Google Ohio license verification, and it pops you up to a page where they've got like all of the different boards in Ohio. Put that person's name in there. Make sure they're actually licensed. If
Is
you
this a common thing that like you're saying, make sure? Common enough?
It's more common than you would think. This is, you can also, at least in Ohio, I don't know about other states, but I would assume that it's similar. You can also see if your therapist has had sanctions on their license, and you can see what for. You can pull up like court transcripts or board transcripts and see if they have had any like disciplinary action. So that's something that I would say most people don't do or don't think to do. And again, because therapist communities a lot of the time are kind of tight knit and we are up in each other's business and we know stuff. I see a lot of the time people on people that are advertising as a therapist when really maybe I'm like, you're not licensed and you're actually doing coaching. Or they have had like sanctions on their license to where I personally would never refer a client to them. Like maybe they still are licensed, but they got in trouble with the board for like inappropriate sexual conduct with a client 10 years ago.
Good.
So look up on your state license website this person's name and you can go through and click if their license is active, if they've had any sanctions on their license, and what that was for. So like I said, most people I don't think do that. But that is the one thing that I would absolutely do to and if you can't find them, be like, hey, I'm not seeing you on the license website, like what's your license number, and make them prove it. That's about it. I would say the only other thing is once you do find a therapist, know that it can be like dating and you've already done all this work to find one. But if you're just not clicking, you're probably not going to do great work together and you may need to find somebody else. I tell all my clients in our first session that it's okay if you don't click with me. You can talk to me about it and I will help you find somebody that may be a better fit. Honestly, if you're a client and you don't feel like you're connecting with your therapist probably feels the same way and is like, you know what, it would be better if you see somebody else that you connect with more. So I'm always happy to help somebody find a referral that may be a better fit. I also personally tell all my clients, if you don't want to have that conversation, like just ghost me and it's okay and I will never take it personally. So don't feel bad if you are not connecting with a therapist. Find somebody that you do connect with and that you're going to do really good work with, because again, that connection is going to be the most important part. Red flags are going to be if they disclose too much about themselves. If you come out of that session and you're like, I know their kids' names, their dogs' names, what their family trauma is, blah blah blah, like that's too much. You should not be hearing this much information about your therapist. If they don't give you information on HIPAA or privacy or mandated reporting, then they really should be doing that, and that's a red flag. And then if you just get like general bad vibes, listen to that and maybe find somebody else. So that's it that I have. I know that was a lot, so thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to stop the recording here so that we can talk with everyone here offline. But I don't think, is there anything else you'd like to add for anything before we turn off the recording?
Yep,
Right.
hop off for our insiders only discussion now.